Good morning, it's Friday, the 30th of January. I'm Maret Gwyn and this is Europe Today, your daily fix of European news and analysis live here on Euronews. Coming up on today's show, with Russia and Ukraine set to resume peace talks in Abu Dhabi over the weekend, the EU's foreign policy chief says Moscow is not taking negotiations seriously. After yesterday's meeting of EU foreign ministers, Kaja Kallas also accused the Kremlin of weaponizing winter by pounding Ukraine's energy network and said the EU could consider an entry ban on Russian soldiers who fought in Ukraine. Joining me now on set to debrief all of this is our EU editor, Maria Tadeo. Morning, Maria. Great to have you.
Good morning. Great to see you.
Bring us up to speed now on the latest, because it looks like Ukraine is facing a really, really tough situation.
Well, it is probably the most difficult winter for Ukraine since the war started. Of course, there's been now a weather alert that suggests that temperatures will drop significantly. And we talk about minus 20 degrees, potentially going all the way to minus 30 degrees. The situation even more difficult because the war after 4 years, the energy infrastructure has been severely damaged. And of course, we've talked and reported many times on this network about the very difficult, not just war frontline situation, but really humanitarian when it comes to the blackouts that can go on for hours, the impact on the electricity and the heating, minus 20 degrees and no heating. Obviously, it's a very difficult situation for the people of Ukraine. On that note, yesterday, Kaja Kallas said that she believes the Russians are not serious about the negotiations. We know there's a number of documents that have been put on the table, conversations and talks that are going on between the U.S., Russia, the European Union and Ukraine. We talk about this idea of the prosperity plan, the reconstruction of Ukraine all the way to 2040. But obviously, all of this is underpinned by the final peace settlement. And that still looks very, very far away. This brings up, however, a very uncomfortable question for Kaja Kallas, which is, why are the Europeans not directly involved? Is there a way that Europe can have a bigger say? And we are now seeing tensions within the 27, some of which suggest Kaja Kallas cannot do it. We need to bring up someone else to talk to the Russians. Let's take a look at those different opinions.
We need to talk with them if we want a solution. If we can't talk to them, we won't find a solution. And if I was too small to do it, if then President Macron or someone else is able to represent Europe because they don't want to talk to Kaja Kallas.
We can't be the demandeurs here that, we go to Russia, talk to us. The concessions that the Americans are putting on Ukraine are quite strong. So I don't think there's anything that we can offer to Russia on top of that.
Divided opinions there. Maria, there was also consensus yesterday on listing Iran's Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization.
Yeah, of course, European officials briefing that this is really the killing machine of the regime, and this is in response to this very violent crackdown that took place at the start of the month on the streets of Iran when the protests really took off. Ultimately, the French, the Spanish and the Italians agreed to designate them as a terrorist group. There had been concerns, and this is why this decision took about 2 weeks to get finally sealed and approved by the French and certainly also the Spanish, that there is a hostage situation in Iran. So there was a concern about the well-being of nationals and European citizens who are still in the country. But also there was a concern that this could really completely now cut off all diplomatic channels. It was interesting yesterday to hear from Kaja Kallas saying that this new designation as a terrorist group had been, quote, a calculated risk, but also pointing to the idea that the channels with the foreign ministry still remain.
Maria, thank you for that. We'll be keeping an eye on that story, of course, throughout the day. But coming up next, I'll be joined by former European Council President Charles Michel. He served for 5 years in the top Brussels job and steered EU leaders' response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. He has also served as the Prime Minister of Belgium before becoming the European Council President. And I'm very, very happy to say that he joins us now in our studio in Brussels. Sir, welcome back to Euronews. Great to have you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Listen, we heard from Kaja Kallas there, resisting this pressure coming from Meloni, Macron, for the EU to engage directly in talks with Russia. Do you think it's the right moment?
I think that Emmanuel Macron and Meloni, they are right to say we need to be around the table, because today that's very sad. It's even a bit shocking. Who is defending the European interests around the table? Not the United States, not Russia. And I think that Ukraine and the EU, we have the same goals. we want more stability, we want peace, we want security, and I think it would be legitimate if there is a way to make sure that our European interests are better defended.
But who can go to those talks? Who can stand up to Putin? Is it Kaja Kallas? Because many leaders say she can't do it.
Yeah, I think that the European Council has a special role to play because that's a very legitimate body with 27 heads of state, head of government, and that's, I think, a debate for the European Council. And I'm confident that sooner or later the European Council can give a mandate to someone. It can be to the President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, for instance, to be the one who has the legitimacy to talk on behalf of the 27 member states.
Yet calls in this town this week from some quarters on the EU to consider merging the roles of the Council chief and the Commission chief. Is that something you'd support? Do we need a president of Europe?
Look, that's a traditional debate. And the day there will be a direct election of the European representatives of the European institutions, then that's a legitimate debate and question. But, you know, my impression is the following. The European Union is based on a double legitimacy. The member states on the one hand, and on the other hand, the European Parliament and the Commission with a certain role to defend the general European interest. And I think whatever we do in terms of institution, we will have always to take into account this double reality.
You had harsh words for the NATO chief, Mark Rutte, earlier this week. Do you think he's smooth-talking Trump too much? You say that Europe is able to defend itself.
I want to be clear. Mark Rutte is disappointing, and I'm losing confidence. Why? Because I'm not expecting Mark Rutte to be an American agent. I'm expecting Mark Rutte to work for the unity within NATO. Today we can see that Article 5 is put in danger. Why? Because of this very hostile rhetoric developed within the United States, developed by the White House, point one. We face intimidations, we face threats. What is going on with Greenland is not acceptable, and I expect Mark Rutte to be a strong voice to defend the unity within NATO.
If you were in his shoes, what should Europe do? How can it stand up to Trump?
That's very clear that appeasement will not work. Flattering diplomacy will lead to a failure, to a total failure. The more you use this flattering diplomacy, the more we are observing the United States are going very far in this tactic of intimidation and threats against their allies. And the EU is a very loyal partner and ally for the United States. That's why we do not deserve this behavior. We can see, for instance, the ambiguities coming from the United States with Russia, the way Donald Trump decided to give legitimacy to Vladimir Putin. We can see some sanctions against a former EU commissioner. That's not acceptable.
Finally, on Ukraine, very briefly, if you can, President Zelensky says the country should join the EU by 2027. Is that feasible?
He's absolutely right, and that's possible. That's a question of political will. The Ukrainians are making a lot of progress in terms of criteria that have to be fulfilled to join the EU, and everything must be done to help them, to support them. And I think that Ukraine, being member of the EU, it should take place as fast as possible.
Charles Michel, that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for coming to join us on set this morning. See you again soon, we hope. Now, we're moving on to another hot-button geopolitical issue now. It's been nearly 1 month since the US ordered the capture of Venezuela's Nicolás Maduro. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said earlier this week that the US is committed to democratic transition in the country. I'm pleased to say that joining us live from Madrid is Leopoldo López, a figurehead of Venezuela's opposition forces. So welcome, it's great to have you with us. Let us start with the recent US intervention in Venezuela. You've fought for years for democracy and freedom in the country. Is the US helping your cause here?
Oh, thank you very much. I can tell you that we are much better off than what we were on January the 2nd. Venezuelans, we have done for decades everything to have democracy in our country. We have taken the streets, not once, but thousands of times. We have gone to elections, and these elections have been stolen. We have engaged in 16 rounds of negotiations with all sorts of mediators, from the Vatican to ex-presidents to Norway, and it all led to the same position where Maduro only used those negotiations to buy time and to manipulate. So we are much better off with the removal of Nicolás Maduro. We are not where we want to be. We want to be in a fully and total democratic Venezuela, and we understand that this is a transition, and that's what we need to push for.
Because the figureheads of the Maduro regime, we're talking about Delcy Rodriguez, Diosdado Cabello, are still in power in Caracas. Is the US really interested in free and fair elections, or do you think they will settle for a soft democracy if it serves their commercial interests?
Well, I can tell you that the Venezuelan people are set to be in a democratic Venezuela. We've been fighting for this for, I said, over 2 decades, and we will continue to do so. That's the aspiration of the Venezuelan people, the Venezuelan democratic leadership, and the U.S. has committed to democracy, and not in the very, very short term. There is a transition that has started, mostly on the economic realm, but we need to push for democracy. That's our responsibility, and that's what we will do. We expect a process that will lead us to a general election that will give the Venezuelan people the voice to who will govern the country. That's what we hope for. That's what we'll fight for.
And are you hoping for example, the return of Maria Corina Machado, or would you be able to contemplate returning to Venezuelan politics if the US does guarantee this transition?
No, absolutely. Absolutely. There are thousands, I would say hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans that will be willing to return at the political level. Yes, we hope to return as soon as possible to Venezuela and to contribute to the rebuilding of our country.
Leopoldo Lopez, that's all we have time for, I'm afraid, but thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you with us this morning. Next up, we're moving to space. Is the EU getting ahead in the space race? Our reporter Jakob Janis takes a look.
Hey folks, let's clear the air. When you hear EU space industry, you think of bureaucracy, not rockets. And honestly, I can't blame you. This week, your reporter took part in the European Space Conference to verify it. So is the EU that far behind in the space race? Let's take a look. Meet Copernicus, Europe's eyes in the sky. It is the invisible infrastructure that powers your weather app and spots the storms before they even hit. And meet Galileo, the EU's navigator. It connects your bank and your phone, and is the only thing ensuring that when a geopolitical crisis explodes, the EU is not relying on Washington to tell Europeans where they are. And meet the new kid, GovSat.com, because space is now a dogfight. The EU finally has an encrypted shield for European leaders and the military to protect secrets from cyber attacks. But here is what Eurospace is not. It isn't Starlink or SpaceX. While Elon Musk dominates the sky with thousands of satellites, Europe is still playing catch-up. And the EU's alternative, IRIS², won't be flying until 2029. So can the EU compete with the US and China? The talent is here, but the speed, not quite. Europeans are missing Silicon Valley's private capital, and European pension funds are too scared to bet on exploding rockets. And while China and the US are shooting for the moon this year, Brussels is still filling out the paperwork. And hard work is ahead. In this era of hard power, can the EU be seen from space? Because for now, all I can see is the Great Wall of China and, obviously, Trump's ego.
Jakob Janis there. And that brings this edition of Europe Today to an end. Thank you for your company throughout the week. We'll be back with more news and analysis on Monday morning. Have a great weekend.